what is a business process or business process map? Now, typically when an organization signs up for an ERP implementation project, what is the first step? I would have loved this to be an interaction session, but anyhow, a core team is formed which will be responsible for implementation. Now, why? So that they can be pulled and questioned in steering committee meetings? I'm joking. A core team is formed which will be there are two sections of this core team. One which represents the organization as is, and others which knows the product which is going to get implemented in that organization. The prime objective of this team is to ensure that ERP gets embedded in the organization finally within projected time frame and cost. Now, when I'm saying that the two sections of the core team, one representing organization and another representing the product, doesn't mean that the set of people who are representing organizations are necessarily from the organization. And the set of the people who represent product team necessarily be only from the software service provider or a product. It can be a mix of people. So I'm just leaving it at the two teams, sub-teams as a part of a project team. Now management has asked the first section of the team, which represents the organization, to come out with a documentation of what happens in the organization. After getting empowered from the management, this team calls for a meeting with all functional heads of the organization. So this is the platform which I've set. Now they call for a meeting in a conference room and all functional heads are there and they go through a round of discussions for 2-3 hours on a blackboard. Which department does what and what is the roles, what is the inputs, what are their tasks performed. So on a blackboard, each functional head as he speaks out, something is drawn. Like design team is there, where there are consumers, they do consumer research, they do interact with suppliers, they do receipts and testing of the materials, there is a production line available, there is assembly that happens, inspection happens on the production, test processes, machines. So after the team gets all this information in 1 or 2 or 3 hour sessions in the conference room, they come back, they put all the notes, some are there in the mind, some is there on the board, some noted down. Some functional heads which feels passionate about their work describes in details. Some functional heads who feels like it's a normal what they are doing, they don't express it in details. Something is captured, something gets missed out. But what is important, what is not important, this team has to come back, sit, note it, document it. Then they sit across, they feel this is not enough, they go to the individual department, take little more details, they restructure, they rearrange different blocks. And they finally arrive at, yeah, there is a supplier side of it, there is an end user side of it, and then there is an organization and there is some departments and the flow of the process that happens in the organization. Now each department, they say it as a process of the subsystems that happens in the department. Then there are some subsystems in the departments. So the team still feels like this is not enough to be represented as a document to the management. So they again go back to individual departments, sit with again functional head, different users, debate with them, see how they function. They again go through it, and they finally feel that it will be logical if they start from a point and finish to a point. Considering this as a manufacturing organization, they thought it will be first better to start from a transaction and finish it off. So they go back and then they group it from the transactional flow process kind of. So for any organization, customer becomes the primary importance. So they start with sales and marketing, which receives orders, then orders being sent to the manufacturing department. There they procure the material and do the build of the material. Then they do shipping of the product. And then they bill to the customer, and then they collect money from the customers, and all that get collated in the accounts management. If there is a receivables or whatever other statements, they send it back to the marketing department. So when the team arrives at this, they call it as a transactional flow. But each of these blocks, when they went inside, they found that there are other processes that happens into each of these blocks. So when you look at sales and marketing, there is a marketing process, then there is a sales process that happens, then there is a quotation process that happens, there is a credit approval that happens. So similarly, you have like at order received, they review orders, they see general documentations. So like that, when they fill, so there is a transaction flow. There are processes attached to each of the transactional flows. But then when they looked at it, they thought that this is not fully capturing what all organizations do, because their job is to capture everything what the organization do. And when they looked at the first blackboard drawing which they have, design team was coming as a very proactive team, but they didn't find the design team here. They tried to plug in that, but they were not able to, because the regular day-to-day business happens which doesn't have a design team's much of a role, because their role is something which is parallel to prior to a product being developed. So then again they revisited and they all grouped together other processes which not directly but indirectly affect the core processes. So they found out whole lots of other processes in the organization. They had a design engineering, they found that there is a supplier approval processes, then there are quality system processes, document controls, control to test equipments, data security is there, personal processes are there, customer complaints are there, facility processes are there. So there are whole sets of processes. The idea of finally putting all this together is like there is a core business transaction that happens. Along with that, there are certain processes that directly impact those transactions. And there are processes within an organization that indirectly affects the transaction. Some of them are for controlling the transactions. Some of them are from a strategic perspective. Some of them are just as an indirect support to the main operations. So when they come up with this document, okay, this is a one-slide document, but actually speaking, if you look at it, each of these processes were defined, and finally a full document is prepared. This normally is called as a business process document for an organization. Now, different people will prepare it a little differently, but the main idea, the guidelines with which this is prepared is first to capture the transaction flow, then the associated processes with it, then the indirect processes. So if you term this as a business process for the organization, the book definition, as it is available in various books, a business process is a collection of related structured activity or tasks that produce a specific service or a product, serve a particular goal for a particular customer or set of customers. Now within an organization also, one department can be a customer to another department. So whomsoever you are feeding your output normally becomes your customers. Other way, if you look at it, the way it was being put in the previous slide, it often can be visualized with a flowchart or a sequence of activity with interleaving decision points, or with a process matrix, which I have not shown, as a sequence of activity with relevance rules based on data in the process. And the steps taken to create business process for an organization is called business process map. So what all steps they have taken to create the document? First, they had a small meeting initiated with head of the departments that went into little more discussions. Then they went into with individual departments. They may have to sit with individual users to understand, create. And this is, although a lot of tools are available in the market to do business process mapping, this actually, if you ask me, is a skills which is very similar to a detective agencies. You need to understand, question, cross-question, brainstorm, and finally arrive at what are the exact business process of an organization, how to map it properly into the document. Hope I'm able to. So if you see the business process mapping definition, business process mapping refers to the activity involved in defining exactly what a business entity does, who's responsible, to what standard a process should be completed, and how the success of a business process can be determined. Once this is done, there can be no uncertainty as to the requirement of every internal business process. That means you have captured it thoroughly. A business process illustration is produced. Now once all this is done, you have a business process illustration of the organization. This is a very important document. And I would say the first step in doing requirement gathering for ERP implementation for an organization is to know and understand the basic business processes. If you don't have a fit on this, it will not lead to a successful implementation later on. If you look at the slide which I mentioned, that finally the business process document, so somewhere a direct transaction related process, then there were processes which were supporting transactions, then there were certain indirect processes. So if you group them together, typically there are three types of business processes that emerges. One is the management processes, where the corporate governance and the strategic managements are being taken the prime focus. The operational processes, which is the core business of the company, where operation, purchasing, manufacturing, inventory, sales, what we have shown from where we started the whole thing. And then there are support processes, accounting, recruitment, sales, HR, call center, technical support, IT. These three types. So all of the business processes within a company can be grouped under one of these three types of processes. I'm just little digressing. For any organization, the main aim is to grow the business, create profits for the organization. And there are risks involved. So in the management terms, if you see, every business entity is exposed to three types of risks of varying degrees. One is a marketing risk, another is a credit risk. It's not marketing, I would say, market risks, which is an environment in which they are being, and credit risks and the operational risks. While market and the credit risks depends largely on the external factors in which the organization is doing business. Most critical is operational risk. The companies which has gone down or where debacles have happened, like Satyam, Lehman Brothers, They have all failed not because of anything else but the operational risks they carry inside the organization. Thus, controls in the operational business process are key to an organization. A good controls on all the operations that is happening in the organization is very important. So this team, if you ask me, as a core team, has developed